if you would you take your hand and touch your heart? Okay, just that simple word. Just be aware of that shift of attention, how suddenly our attention had shifted. We feel that greater connection with our heart. A simple shift that begins one of the most profound and meaningful shifts that we have the power to do as human beings and as spiritual beings. One of the concepts of change of consciousness that Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, brought was a shift that he called from Adam man to Christ man. And he was using that as a way of describing something that we experience, a shift in consciousness, a shift in state of awareness. And I'd like to share that because I've had the blessing of not only many years with Unity and with the Fillmore teachings, but also with the Institute of Heart Math, which did scientific research on our transformation. And when I heard their science, I began to look at this shift that Fillmore had been talking about and understand it in a deeper and more meaningful way. This simple understanding is that it's when we are spiritually connected or when we are not spiritually connected. Now, the language fails there because we can never not be spiritually connected. It's everywhere. It's all. It is life. It is intelligence. So, but we go through states of consciousness in which our consciousness is directed by spirit, or our consciousness is directed by basically the body system. So that's the state of consciousness that we're talking about. I think it's easier for me to understand in terms of an experience. So this is something that happened to my son Peter. Peter and his wife Julia live in LA. They'd moved there, and a young couple putting their lives together. Julia had been working part-time for a financial firm, and she got a wonderful job offer. And the job offer really, met their financial goals. It was something that she had been looking forward to. And so she came home to share it with Peter. And as she was talking about it, she began to get more and more upset. And the reason she was upset was she had been working with this company, and she was aware of why everybody else who held this position had left. So she saw the dysfunction. Here was this wonderful opportunity, and did she want to take it or not? It could just be a miserable experience. And as she tried to make this decision and talk about it, she got more and more upset. And it began to trigger for Julia past anxiety experiences that she'd had. So Peter's listening to his wife share this and seeing her get upset. And fortunately, Peter knows what to do about it. Now, when my wife Catherine and I were working for quite a number of years with HeartMath, Peter came and learned their science and learned some of the skills that had developed from their discoveries. So he knew that when you're upset, okay, when your emotions are triggered, that there is a change that you can make within your body. And that change literally changes the patterns of the heart. And that changes the patterns of the brain. And you go from being upset to really being at peace. Not only that, you're not only at peace, but you understand what to do about the challenge before you. That light of understanding that Bob read in the Word this morning. And they've been able to measure how that happens biophysically. So Peter had this wonderful understanding, but it turns out this wasn't the first time that Julie had been upset about something, and he had brought this up before, and it had become clear to him at that point that he could kind of be her heart coach or her husband, but not both. And so he knew what to do, and he couldn't do a thing about it. So he's sitting there, and you know, we all have loved ones and family, and you know, I'm sure you've had people who, you know, they've been upset, they're in a difficult situation, they don't know what to do, or they're going down a path that just isn't working for them, and you care, you want to help, but you can't. And that powerlessness feeling began to come up for Peter, and frustration. And then suddenly he realized, well, I'm sitting here, I'm upset, I'm frustrated, I'm feeling powerless, and I can do something about me, even if I can't do something about her. So he went through some very simple steps. And in this step, there is an experience. The step actually started with what we did right at the beginning, that shift, where you just move your attention to the area around your heart. Simplest way is just touching the heart. But then he went through a shift that causes the heart's intelligence to take over the body. Now, heart math, because they're secular, describes this as heart intelligence. What we know is it is our spiritual wisdom. Our spiritual wisdom and power flows through us when we go through the biophysical change. It opens a door, and the spiritual energy, the intelligence, the power of spirit moves into a greater state of consciousness. And we change our consciousness. We're looking at the world very differently. We've done this shift that Fillmore was talking about, from Adam man to Christ man. So Peter's gone through this experience. So now there's a couple evidences when we're connected to spirit. One is that we're at peace. We aren't upset because we are in touch with a greater presence and wisdom. So Peter found he was at peace, but also that understanding, that light of understanding, what another term for it is wisdom. And Peter knew what to do. He knew how to respond to Julie and her challenge. So he just got up and went over to her and said, "Julia, can I hold you for a moment?" And she kind of stopped and said, "Okay." And so he just put his arms around his wife and just held her. And after a minute or two, there was that deep sigh. And she said, "Thank you. And thank you for not saying anything." That was part of the guidance. A simple situation. But the truth is, our divine nature is always present. The wisdom and power of spirit is always here with us. And we can shift from being connected to that and experiencing the peace, the wisdom, or disconnected in the sense that another perceptual system is running our body. Think of it this way. I don't know if you remember that moment before you, as a spiritual being, said, "Okay, I'm going to explore this third dimensional part of the universe. I'm going to enter into the earth and do the human thing, get one of those bodies, and let myself experience that part of the creation." And I don't remember that moment, but I sure know the results of it. Okay, here we are. But when we made that decision as a spiritual being to enter into the biophysical body, we got the instrument that had been developed for us to interpret the third dimensional realm. And that instrument is the brain, this amazing, amazing instrument that lets us take the data around us, turn it into experience, turn it into understanding, turn it in, and be able to, go from simply standing there in the woods to creating computers and sharing over distances. I mean, just amazing instrument. But what that instrument doesn't have access to is the wisdom that you had when you entered in. It doesn't know your purpose. It doesn't know itself as a multi-dimensional, infinite spiritual being. It interprets the third dimension, not the spiritual nature of our being. So to get that knowledge, that beautiful knowledge that we each have, we do it by choice, by making a choice to make a shift, because the brain is the default mechanism until we awaken to the point where we regularly choose to respond from our hearts. So it's a simple shift, but a very profound one. And now that at least aspects of it we're able to measure scientifically, but it's universal. It's been there. I mean, this is one of the things I love about Unity, is it honors the truth that we know as universal, not just tied to one religion or path. So let me just share here the screen, and I want to just share a couple of my favorite understandings. This is from the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is telling us where this presence, this connection is found. It says, I am the super soul, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living entities. So this is Krishna, the divine presence incarnate, talking to Arjuna, a prince that he is guiding. I am the super soul, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living entities. So in that beautiful statement of wisdom, we see where we find this connection. And then this from Jesus, beloved master teacher. And he doesn't focus on where, he focuses on how. How? Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Love your neighbors as yourself. Love one another, the 3 commandments that he gave. All one choice, the choice to love. In the heart, we experience that love. Okay, it doesn't matter where you go. You can go to the darkest jungles anywhere, and when you ask somebody, where do you experience love? Nobody points to their head. They all go here, because this is where that power resides in these experiences, and that presence, that super soul, that divine. So then the question becomes, how do I make the shift? And that's where some of the beautiful scientific research helps us understand how we move into a state of real spiritual connectedness. And what they found when they measured people's hearts and brains and all that biophysical stuff is that we go from a state, they would call it incoherence or disorder, into a state of higher harmony within the body called a coherence. That shift would actually take place first within the heart with particular set of feelings, not all feelings, but the feelings that were related to love. Now, one of the most effective, and they, instead of just measuring, feel love, And if we did that, we'd all feel maybe a very different aspect of love. But love is so encompassing that you can focus on very specific feelings, such as the feeling of appreciation. Now, if we talked about appreciation, we'd all have fairly similar feelings. So the feeling of appreciation is a part of the feeling of love that we can use to transform the body and access this deep spiritual power and wisdom. Let me share just another quick example of it. I was living in the redwood forest in Santa Cruz, California, which at this very moment I think are being deluged in rain and the rivers are rising. But the challenge that we had at that moment in the redwood forest was we had to get down the hillside through the trees and to the bus to get the kids to school. Okay, and we had to, every morning getting ready to get down and drive the kids down to the bus to get to school. We had an affirmation that we used together. It was, hurry up or you'll miss the bus. And I'm guessing, being in unity, you all have used affirmations and you're completely aware of what had to eventually manifest. We missed the bus. We showed up. We're looking down the highway. There's nothing coming. And we were hoping it was late. It wasn't. It had been there. It had gone on. And in the redwood forest, you can't catch up with it. That's not a possibility the way the roads are. So I'm suddenly there. And of course, the kids, they didn't find this. They, had to hunt for that. And, we were racing at the end to get there. And now we've got this problem. I've got to get them to school. I thought of making them walk, but it was 8 miles and that through narrow, windy roads. And that didn't seem like a good idea, though it kind of felt like maybe that would be okay for a moment. But, and then I realized, and I couldn't take them because I had to go on and be at work in just a few minutes. So I was in one of those impossible situations. And so I was just aware, part of what was going on for me was, I was frustrated and upset with the kids for, putting me in this situation, for being late, not getting their stuff together in time. And, I didn't know what to do. So here I am in a state of emotional turmoil. And I remembered, I've been teaching this heart stuff. Maybe I should try it. So I touched my heart, started the process of just making that shift. And then I knew that one of the powerful feelings was appreciation. Well, fortunately, I'm sitting at the edge of a road that is covered by giant redwood trees in the morning. All I had to do was look up. Now, I couldn't appreciate the children. That's a different teaching. Love your enemies. That's not what we're doing here. Okay, this is, can you get to a feeling that is a feeling of love? And appreciation is one of those feelings. So I could look at and I could just experience the beauty of the sunlight coming through the redwood trees. And I could breathe that in. I could feel it. And as I felt the feeling, I felt my body change. And 2 things happened. One, I went from frustration to peace. My peace I give unto you. Christ man, spiritually connected. I went from frustration to peace, and I went from confusion to clarity. I knew what to do. There was another thing that was important too. When the brain is processing our information, we do not feel connected. We distinguish ourselves from others and from the situation. With the change into the spiritual flow and spiritual connection, I felt connected with my children. Literally, I know that the electromagnetic field of my heart changed and connected with theirs. That's a whole nother bunch of science, but it's the experience of connection with others when we are in spiritual connection takes place. And I was aware at that moment of their stress. You know, their parents had been on them all morning to get it together and get in the car, and then the bus isn't there. So they were upset. And so I felt, instead of frustration or anger with them, I felt care, connection, care. And I was aware that they had difficult days before them. I don't know if you want to reincarnate and go through being a middle schooler again, but I assure you it's a stressful journey. Not my goal. But and how they entered their day would be important. So part of the clarity for me was I could drive them to school. I needed to help them relax and get back to feeling good and connected so that they could handle their day well. That I was a responsible employee, and showing up late one day out of several years was not going to hurt anybody or me. And so I could turn around and say to them, okay, we're all a little stressed. I want you to take a deep breath and relax. I'll put on some music. I'll drive you to school, and we'll talk about not doing this again when we get home. And they gladly agreed to that. A shift. Now, these are simple experiences, but it's in our day-to-day that our spiritual connection counts. To make a shift, to choose our hearts. That's where your spiritual connection is. That opens the flow to the depth and the power of your spiritual being. Simple. I choose my heart. That's what we're doing when we just touch our chest. I choose my heart. When I'm frustrated and I don't know what to do, I choose my heart. When we've got the folks in the family that are upset or a problem there, I choose my heart. Our kids, our challenges, the things that don't work, I choose my heart. Touching your heart and feeling deep appreciation. That's the point that changes it. That's love being felt within your being. That's God flowing through you. Because I know that you do that, and it makes a difference in our world. Thank you.